Priest is back with a new single, Cron of Horns.
Here we are.
And in all honesty, this song has gotten me and many Judas Priest fans puzzled, which is just a fancy word for asking ourselves, what up? So, let's take a look at it. So by now, we've already heard 3 songs from the upcoming Judas Priest album Invincible Shield, and in most cases, 3 singles is more than enough to get a general taste of a given record. Yeah, not in case of this one though. All 3 of the singles vastly differ from each other, presenting 3 completely opposite sides of the spectrum of the Judas Priest sound. And if in case of Panic Attack and Trial by Fire you could somewhat trace them to different eras of the band's career while still finding a common denominator in terms of their sound. On Cron of Horns, Judas Priest go for something they only do on very special occasions, and I promise I'll explain what I mean. But for now, I guess we have to point out that there is actually one common aspect for all 3 of the singles. They're here to prove that B-flat minor is a new favorite key of Judas Priest. The song opens with a melodic guitar lick played by Richie Faulkner, and I'm already looking forward to hearing a story about how Richie wrote it. You know, something along the lines of Slash's Sweet Child O' Mine, with Richie being used to play this lick just as a warm-up until Rob Halford walked into the room and said that he can make it into a song or something like that. But the truth is that, strictly structure-wise, this intro is somewhat unnecessary. And yet, at the same time, it does set this enchanting and captivating atmosphere, which lasts through the entire song. As the opening riff grows in power, your brain immediately expects it to hear culminating in an outburst of energy, similar to how it was on the first 2 singles. Yet this time, Judas Priest present a softer and a much more melodic side of their songwriting. In one of the recent interviews, Richie Faulkner said that Invincible Shield has no ballads on it, and that it will be a pretty intense record, which is totally fine. But here's the thing, I love power ballads. No, let me rephrase it, I love Judas Priest's power ballads, and I do that for a very specific reason. You know, most bands, especially in the 80s, were using power ballads to lure in a new fan base and make their old fans sob for a moment before headbanging again, as a power ballad always had to come before the fastest and the heaviest song on the record. You know, it was somewhat of a marketing cheat code for most bands. But not for Judas Priest. First of all, Priest ballads were nothing like any other band's ballads. You can't really even call them ballads. They just happen to be slower paced heavy metal songs, usually very heavy lyrically. And most importantly, throughout their career, Judas Priest only wrote those when they had an important message to share. Whether it was the early run-of-the-mill, Beyond the Realms of Death, or one of my personal favorites from the new Judas Priest era, Angel, they all share a message important to the band at that given period of time, and not just your paint-by-numbers, sobby, broken heart story. And that's why, as rare as Judas Priest do release them, fans simply trust those ballads, holding the ones that resonate most with them close to their hearts, as on those, Judas Priest truly show their most vulnerable side, opening up to their fans like you would do to your family.
Angel, take me far away.
And here's the thing, I don't care what we call Cron of Horns, a power ballad or just a mid-tempo piece, but on it, the band does exactly that.
I learned the hard way that what you dream for comes from the pain you hold inside.
Lyrically, Cron of Horns is the band's confession letter to the fans, and I know that each of us, of course, can interpret the lyrics differently, and therefore I guess there is even no point of giving my personal interpretation of it. But I think that many will agree with me if I say that on these first 3 singles of Invincible Shield, and especially on Cron of Horns, despite the whole fact that its title could have actually taken it in a very cheesy direction, but Rob Halford showcases some of the best lyrics he's written in his entire career. As per me, Cron of Horns is a no-regret confession of a truly free man.
Heavy is the crown of horns.
In addition to the lyrics, one of the highlights of this song, or rather two of the highlights, because there are two of them here, is definitely those melodic and very touchy guitar solos performed by Richie Faulkner, the first of which comes right after the breakdown. And talking about that breakdown, I actually really like how Judas Priest did not really try to go fully new age and make the song much heavier than it actually is with this breakdown, but rather kept it within the same mood and the atmosphere of Cron of Horns as a whole, with its only purpose actually being setting a listener up for a very emotional guitar solo. Overall, on Cron of Horns, Richie Faulkner once again showcases how incredible of a guitar player he actually is and how much he has grown in the past decade. Once again proving that you don't really have to have the fastest or the most technically complex composition in order to achieve the main goal of what music is actually supposed to do: bring out a listener's emotions. And the only regret guitar-wise that I have about Cron of Horns is the whole fact that we don't really get to hear the end of that magnificent second solo. But despite my overall very warm sentiments towards Cron of Horns, I have to be honest with you. When Judas Priest first posted that promo saying that Cron of Horns will be released in a couple of days, the only sentiment that clip has raised in me was fear.
What?
Yes, I'll be honest with you. I was scared about how indifferent I was about what I heard there. As the thing is that if you take a small bit of a chorus and just listen to it by itself, one could easily imagine this to be a very low effort dead rock tune. And maybe that's why the first time I listened to it, I was actually rather reserved. But then the more I heard it, the more it started resonating with me. And that's when I realized that this is exactly how I felt about every Judas Priest ballad in the past.
Heavy is the crown of horns that rests upon his head.
As I said before, Cron of Horns is one of those songs on which Judas Priest show their more emotional side, and therefore you, as a listener, have to build a relationship with it. No, it may not be an immediate straight-to-your-face banger like Painkiller or Panic Attack is, but the more you start building that relationship, the more you start to appreciate it. And looking at the list of my personal favorite Judas Priest tracks, I realized that for most of them, it was a very similar journey. So I simply cannot wait to see how this relationship will grow over time and to see how our perception of Cron of Horns will change when we finally get to hear it among other tracks on Invincible Shield on March 8th.
Heavy is the crown of horns from all the blood he shed.
Which leads us back to the main question. Now, many fans have complained about the whole fact that today, almost 2 months before the release of Invincible Shield, Judas Priest already dropped 3 singles, thus leaving no mystery for when the album actually comes out. Well, first of all, in my opinion, if anything, the release of Cron of Horns has confused us even more, as all 3 of the tracks are actually extremely different and sound nothing alike. And together with the fact that there will be 14 new tracks on Invincible Shield, well, that just shows that by now we know nothing about what the album will actually sound like. And this is what we love about Judas Priest. One of the things I love about Judas Priest is how diverse their music is even within the album and from a record to a record, as Judas Priest is one of those bands that never released 2 of the same sounding albums at all. And with this release, we'll once again hear that it does look like Invincible Shield will be yet another step forward, and not simply a ripoff or play on its predecessor's success. And by the way guys, I released this album a day later than I was supposed to, simply because it was one of the first evenings without any air raid sirens here in Ukraine. And so instead of working on new content, I allowed myself to spend an evening simply zoning out while listening to my favorite music. So hope you don't mind me doing that, and thank you guys as always for all the support you're showing to me, this show, and Ukraine through this very, very difficult time. But anyways, what do you guys personally think about Cron of Horns? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!